So first we've got Sophie Emder from Sweltering Cities. I know Sophie well, she's pretty amazing. Sophie studied conservation biology and international relations at Monash, has a keen interest in climate change policy. She's interested in international relations theory and foreign policy, which all works very well with climate. She has a strong background in analytical thinking. Absolutely, I told you I made this up. Academic writing and interpersonal communications, and she's passionate about advocating to communities impacted by extreme heat and her work at Sweltering Cities. So do I just hand over one of these little things like this, and you work that out?
Great. I really need to change that LinkedIn bio. It sounds very strange, like analytical thinking. I don't think it's working. So what we do is we work with communities and talk with communities all across the country about how they're feeling the heat, what impact the heat is having on them in their homes, at work, in their suburbs, and what changes people want to see so that they're not getting sick in their homes every year because of the heat. They're not getting sick at work because we know that people, all of us are feeling the heat in different ways. I know for myself. The other day when I was working from home, I was working from home, I was about to leave the house to go somewhere for work, and suddenly I started to feel really sick from the heat. I felt really dizzy, I felt really unwell, and the medication I take interacts with heat in that way, but I still, even knowing that, I didn't expect that I would suddenly start to feel so sick, and I talk about heat every day. So just to say, all of us here today are feeling the heat in different ways, especially this past week. I've never known a summer in Melbourne like this, and I've lived here for about 8 years, and this feels like a really critical, difference in what summers are like now compared to even a few years ago. We just haven't had heat waves that go on for so long, that are so intense and so hot and so prolonged, especially overnight, which, we know overnight is when the heat can feel the most oppressive and the most difficult to deal with. I don't think that I need to talk about, too much about how heat is impacting communities, because I think we all know how the heat is impacting us, whether it's trying to get to work on a 40-degree day, standing under an unsheltered, unshaded bus stop, and what that feels like, or living in a house without cooling, or without insulation. I've lived in many rental homes in Melbourne, and probably, some people here can attest to the fact that our homes are not built to keep us safe in the heat. They're actually making a lot of us sick. But I do think that it is important to continue to speak into existence the fact that heat waves are a disaster and that heat waves are a hazard and an emergency. We need to start viewing heat waves and extreme heat the same way that we view floods and bushfires, as critical emergencies, public health emergencies that are impacting our health, impacting our well-being and our quality of life. I'm just thinking about a lot of the conversations that I've had with community members the last 2 years that I've been working at Sweltering Cities, and I think it's worth continuing to talk about the visceral impact that heat is having. So, I remember having conversations with people who, all the folks who are sleeping in the bathroom during heat waves because it's the only cool spot in the house. People that are riding the trains all day during a hot day, during a heat wave, because again, their homes are making them sick and they have to leave the house. It's the only place they know where to go. People that are walking around the streets at night at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, again, to escape their homes because it's making them sick. These are all conversations I've had recently in the past few months with people, and we've heard literally thousands of stories like this. Every day we hear stories like this of the visceral ways that heat is impacting people. And it's a real shock to hear these stories every day, and then to see the slowness and the lack of action nationally around how we view heat waves. We don't see them as disasters. And I was thinking about, that the topic of this event is adaptation, and I was thinking about what adaptation means to us and how we can really put that into a really practical way to think about it. And for sweltering cities, adaptation to heat means really practical justice solutions. So, we need to also separate the difference between heat wave disaster response and heat wave adaptation. So whereas, heat wave disaster responses means ensuring that people experiencing heat stroke get appropriate medical care, that's disaster response. Heat wave adaptation is things like safe homes, safe rental homes that don't make people sick and give people heat stroke because they're not insulated properly, there's no cooling. It means making our bus shelters, putting shade and shelter on our bus stops so that people aren't waiting for 30 minutes in the baking sun on a 40 degree day, trying to get to work, becoming dehydrated, becoming sick in the heat. It means putting, toilets in our park so that people don't have to choose between keeping themselves hydrated and leaving the house on a hot day because they're worried that there's not going to be, toilets outside their house. And that's a concern for a lot of people. It means, changing the way that we build our homes and suburbs and using lighter coloured building materials so that our cities and our suburbs aren't becoming furnaces during summer. So these are some of the advocacy asks and the policies that we're pushing for. And the last thing I'll say is something really exciting that we did this week to kind of bring all these ideas around heatwave adaptation and resilience and health together was we launched Australia's first Extreme Heat Awareness Day this Wednesday in partnership with the Red Cross. Some people might have seen some things that were posted online, but this was an amazing day. We had over 100 organisations and community members, or hundreds of community members, getting involved, sharing how they feel the heat, what changes that they want to see. And the real message that came out of Extreme Heat Awareness Day was, number one, that again, heatwave adaptation means justice initiatives. We have to view heatwave resilience and adaptation through the lens of justice. And also that heat work is place-based work, and I take this sentence from the WA Council of WACOS, the Council of Community Services. They said this in our webinar this week. When we think about heat and our solutions to heatwave impacts, they have to be place-based and responding to what the community wants and the specific impacts that heat is having for all of us in our own environments, in our own contexts. So I think I'll end on that note, but if anyone wants to get in touch and learn more, if you have stories about the heat you want to share or any specific campaigns you want us to work on, please get in touch. Our website is swelteringcities.org, and we're on all the social medias, and you can find us online. And I think I'll end there.
Thanks so much for that, Sophie. Sweltering Cities is such an excellent organisation. All of us that are working in this space are obsessed with Sweltering Cities, but mainly because of the incredible survey that you guys undertook and the data that's coming out of your amazing organisation. Just the two of you, really, you and Emma. It's really fun. And your sitting team, of course. But if you get the opportunity, do go on the website and have a look at the data. It's really quite amazing and really informative, and it's really helping to drive the conversation around heat and heat waves, and that's really cool. So next we've got Dr. Genevieve Cowie from Doctors for the Environment Australia. Dr. Cowie is a specialist public health physician with extensive experience in public health policy, environmental health and health communication. She's worked across state government, health promotion and research organisations, and currently she volunteers as the convener for research, education and advocacy at Doctors for the Environment Australia. And she's focusing on the intersections of climate and health advocacy. Thanks, Genevieve.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the first important thing about heat to remember is that heat kills more Australians than any other climate disaster. Okay, so that's a surprising fact for many people. And of course, global heating and climate change are causing heat waves to be hotter and to happen more often and to last for longer, so we need to deal with it. In hot weather, we try to keep our internal body temperature to around 30 degrees by sweating. But our bodies can eventually overheat, especially if we do not drink enough fluid or move to a cooler space. Illness caused by overheating can be mild to severe. Firstly, there's heat stress, which many of us will have felt. It's feeling uncomfortable from heat with weakness, tiredness, cramps and dizziness. That can progress to heat exhaustion, where higher internal body temperature starts to happen, so it's above 38 degrees. Normally your body temperature is around 37 degrees. And with heat exhaustion you get reduced amount of sweating because you've now got insufficient fluid in the body to actually sweat, with nausea, vomiting, headache and fainting. If you're unable to do something about the hot situation you're in, that can rapidly progress to heat stroke, which is really dangerous. That's where a very high internal body temperature, so it's more than 40.5 degrees, takes place, with confusion, reduced alertness and red hot dry skin, which may lead to death if not treated quickly. It's a medical emergency. However, that's not the main, distinct heat diseases like that are not the main effect, in fact, of heat in our community. Overheating can worsen the symptoms of chronic diseases, such as heart, lung and kidney disease, because of the extra strain that the high temperatures put on our bodies. Mental health is also affected by hot weather, and we all know this instinctively. Heat waves can worsen mental health, including the risk of suicide. Other disasters, particularly drought and bushfires, often happen with extreme heat, and that's adding to the mental distress, of course. Notably, as our body's first line of defence, skin is also affected by the external world, and severe heat can worsen skin diseases such as eczema, skin infections and the condition called prickly heat, which is also known as miliaria. Because of the strain that on the body that the extreme heat causes, health risks continue for several days after the weather has cooled down. So that's a really important thing to understand. It's also important to understand that everyone can be affected by extreme heat, though some situations make the health risks worse. High humidity, again this is something that you'll all have felt. Sweating doesn't work as well for cooling our bodies when there's a lot of moisture in the air. High nighttime temperatures make it harder for the body to actually recover from daytime heat, and Sophie was just referring to how bad people feel when they can't cool down at nighttime. High temperatures early in the season mean that there's been little chance for our bodies to adjust in the weeks leading up to it, and so that's actually a physical difference that happens as the season progresses. Disruptions to essential services such as communications, electricity, water and transport. These affect cooling systems, supplies, some medical devices and access to help. And smog, of course, it's caused by air pollution and by the same sort of factors that are causing the global heating in the first place, but it's actually made worse by heat, and that can make breathing more difficult, particularly for those who already have lung diseases. And of course, bushfires often happen with extreme heat, and this adds the risk of burns, injuries, and further loss of life. And of course, bushfire smoke can spread for hundreds of kilometres and irritate the eyes, throat and skin, making breathing difficult, as well as worsening heart and lung conditions, including asthma and diabetes. So that's affecting a lot of people. Who is most at risk? So special care is needed for those who already have a chronic medical condition like heart or lung disease, dementia, multiple sclerosis, that's MS, or poor mental health, as heat makes those sort of illnesses worse. Those who are already unwell with a fever, vomiting or diarrhoea, as they become dehydrated easily. Those who are older, particularly those who are frail or over about 65 years. Those who are pregnant or breastfeeding. They may go into early labour, but they also get hotter and need more fluids. Young children, they can't manage their body temperature as well. And they, of course, usually don't have control over their own surroundings. They can't move to cooler places by themselves. But people that take medications that affect the way the body reacts to heat. That's also important. Those who are unable to move around, including getting enough fluids for themselves, so people with disabilities or older people who can't move around adequately. And those who are socially isolated or living alone, as no one may know if they're getting sick. Those who are homeless or have limited choices in housing, work, transport or cooling. Those who work or exercise outdoors. Those who exercise strenuously despite the heat. And this includes people, even if they're fit and healthy, going out for a run in the heat is a bad idea. So, the main responses to this, and we've got a Doctors for the Environment stall in the next room, so you can come and chat to us more about this. Plan ahead for hot weather, keep cool and stay hydrated, and look out for others and know what to do in an emergency, because it is a medical emergency, heat illness. And that's it from me. More details on our website.
Thanks so much, Genevieve. That's some really fantastic background on heat effects, especially the way they affect our health. And I think we're all starting to note that, especially after the last couple of days. It's really interesting because people often talk in this space about vulnerability and who is vulnerable to heat. And of course, when you start to unpack that, we are all vulnerable to heat. There is nobody that is not vulnerable to heat. And so it becomes an issue that it really is the entire community that is impacted. So the next person is actually Beth. Beth is from Urban Guerrillas. Beth Hebdon, is a community development practitioner with 15 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector, local government and social enterprise. She's worked extensively I've jumped ahead to Rebecca, so that's a totally different person. Let's go again to Beth. Beth has studied at the University of New England as an active member of Urban Guerrillas, which just sounds cool. It does cool stuff as well. A youth-focused environmental group dedicated to restoring Indigenous biodiversity through grassroots action and community engagement. Beth and her team work to regenerate urban landscapes, fostering environmental stewardship among young people. How brilliant. Thanks, Beth. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello. First, I'd say that would be wonderful to have that bio. I have 15 years of experience before the age of 30. That's what the job market's after, isn't it? So yeah, I'm Beth, and I'm talking on behalf of Urban Guerrillas. So we're an environmental youth network, and we're helping to help kind of bring together community and bring together that age bracket between 18 to 30 and get them back into the environment. Because I feel like Scouts is for little kids, and then you kind of have your own sense of agency, your own guidance as you get older. But in that demographic, there's not really much you can hands-on do, and there's a lot of energy and it's kind of stagnant, like nowhere to really put it. So we have 3 pillars of connection, education, and restoration. And then going back to connection, we want to create a community. Something that kind of diversifies the environmental knowledge and knows that you can just kind of come along and not know anything about the environment, get dirty, put some trees in the ground, but also have just someone to talk to and some other people to connect to. So Headspace has that 52% of the youth are fearful about climate change, and 46 feel like they're not doing enough. And then 50% feel like their individual actions aren't helping at all. So it's kind of like, why bother? It's a bigger issue than me. And so we're hoping to kind of change that. We held workshops. So over the past 3 years, we've had about 35 workshops. And then it comes in and brings in different knowledges and help educate people on what is a plan, why is it so important, kind of how to help get into bird watching, photography, fungi workshops, how to review a nature strip, and other things like that we've done. And then we have our the fluctuation between day temperatures and night temperatures stays the same, and that's when you get these physiological human impacts, because we're not designed to stay at this constant hot temperature all the time. So there's been studies done in London specifically just to see how it can change, and they've looked at mixed forests and mixed forests in grassland and other areas, and they've realised that places that do have parks, there's a 3-degree change in temperature at night time. And even with that, like at least 1k away from the park's edge, up to 3k's, you're starting to feel these effects. And you're starting to see the benefits of those parks out into the greater area. So the City of London currently has a plan to increase their vegetation from 20% to 40% by 2040. And then with that, it will help kind of shift the overall temperature and navigate some of that stagnant air that gets trapped and bounced around all of the urban infrastructure that does tend to be those darks and those rays that take up the solar radiation. And so the urban expansion, we don't really think about it because yes, we're having housing crisis at the moment, and yes, we're using houses, but at the same time, this will increase the temperature by 5%. And that's a part of flow-on effects to the rest of the population. And it's a bit hard because we want to put in trees, but we need the right trees. So we don't want just trees, we want some grass, we want long grass, so we don't fry the soil and keep some moisture in the soil. But it's also the size of the leaves help create some shade, and that kind of will bring some clear from it all. And there's a bit of a link between everything. Everything's a link. But the human health and green space. So as we've already heard, yes, people are getting sick from the heat. And some people aren't really blocking it. But they're accounted for 9,000 injuries and over 600 deaths in the last decade between 2012 and 2022. And so, as Genevieve said, it's quite an overwhelming thing. You think like, oh, people are actually dying from this, and it's only going to get worse if we don't do anything about it. And there's another bit where it's not just isolated pockets. So there's a wealth disparity between the eastern suburbs of Melbourne and the western suburbs of Melbourne. And in the west, there's less parks. But by adding just small pockets of parks, you're able to create a blanket over Melbourne as a whole, and that will kind of feed it out. And just like the drop in the water, it will have flow-on effects. And they don't have to be big, huge things, they don't have to be water farm everywhere. It can just be little areas that have less water, less maintenance, that still create that shade and that increased transpiration. And then I've got a quote from Gregory Moore, who says that 2 million trees planted in the right position, so north or west, can save up to $180 per year on domestic energy bills just from not using electricity, which brings us to the whole, not only good things that do wonders for your health and for your mental health and for children, but it's actually having a full impact on every aspect. And as we go into a warmer climate, these are things we need to take into consideration as we're planning our cities. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Beth. That was a really great overview. So we'll move to back to Rebecca Abernethy, who we already started introducing. One second. So Rebecca, thank you for joining us. Enliven Multicultural Heroes is where Rebecca comes from. She's a community development practitioner with 15 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector, local government and social enterprise, has worked extensively in homelessness support and migrant and refugee settlement. Holding a bachelor degree of community development from Victoria University, Rebecca is a passionate advocate for community-led solutions and specialises in designing and implementing programs that address the unique needs of multicultural communities in Melbourne's southeast. So thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. And congratulations to all my fellow panelists. Your presentations are amazing, and all of you have spoken quite a lot about some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about as well, which is very handy, that the ideas are already being planted in the audience. So yeah, so I'm from Enliven, Victoria, which is a service of each, which is a community, does community and social support services around Australia, around the east coast of Australia. But Enliven Victoria has been really just recently joined each. So we've been around for about 20 years, primarily in the southeast Melbourne region. So we work quite a lot and quite significantly with migrant and refugee communities in the city of Greater Dandenong, the city of Casey and Cardinia Shire. I'll be talking today about the Multicultural Heat Heroes in Action project, which we just wrapped up just a couple of weeks ago. It was a 12-month project that was funded by Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation. So I guess a little bit before that, Enliven, some of our health promotion workers they do a lot of work in planetary health, and they did a lot of research on understanding the multicultural communities in the southeast, their understanding of the impacts of climate health, and what they found was that there was quite an intense interest in understanding the health impacts of climate change, and how they can prepare themselves and their communities and loved ones for any kind of future impacts they might be feeling. The way that we went about this was we engaged 5 community ambassadors. We're very fortunate to facilitate a community network in the southeast region with about 160 plus people who are in it now, and they're primarily community leaders, active community members, council members, grassroots organisations, mainstream organisations as well. And we facilitate this network, and we provide resources and training and opportunities for everyone to connect and I guess talk to us about what it is they want to know more about or be involved in. So when we got the funding to do this project, we put it out to our network to see who might be interested in being part of this project. So we've got 5 community ambassadors from 5 different organisations in the community. So we're very fortunate to partner with the NAS Recovery Centre in Cranbourne, the North Dandenong Neighbourhood House, Afrio's Ileak in Cardinia Shire, the Helen Turkish Seniors Group, and SMRC, Southern Migrant and Refugee Centre, which is in Dandenong. And so these 5 community ambassadors, we worked about understanding what does this project's going to look like, how are we going to run this. So we got together and we planned about running some community engagement sessions to get a baseline understanding of what people understood about heat health and the impacts of heat health. So I guess the primary aim of it was to reduce health disparities, to increase knowledge and awareness of heat adaptation and heat resilience behaviour, and to, I guess, strengthen communications and connections across the community so that community members can feel empowered by the knowledge and know where to get information. And through that, we also wanted to create resources that would help people get this information in accessible formats. I guess is probably the main aspect of that. There is a lot of information out there, but if we're talking about working with people who are from migrant refugee communities, people who are asylum seekers, people who don't have English as a first language, who aren't able to read in English, aren't able to read in their own language, who don't know where to access information of this sort, then this is where the problems lie, right? People know the impacts of heat, they can feel it. People who have come from other countries have experienced heat waves as well there. But when you come to a new country, you need to know where to access information about, how do I call for an ambulance without an interpreter? How do I call for, how do I contact my council to understand, how can I cut down my energy bills? People who are in insecure housing, people who are in insecure employment, people who are isolated, people who are here and don't have their family around them and can't speak English, don't know the systems here. So I think all of this stuff that everyone's talking about, this is the real impact of this. People who are socially isolated and just don't have that connection. And we all know that strong community connection is what keeps people healthy and safe in these periods of climate disaster and extreme heat events. Sorry, I feel like I'm going all over the place here. But I guess I'll go to the activities. What we worked with our heat heroes to run some community information sessions just to get a bit of a basic knowledge out there, but also to get some feedback on people. Is this information useful to you? Is the way we're delivering it useful to you? What more do you want to need? Do you need to feel more confident about being healthy in a heat wave? What we found was that everyone really loved the heat wave presentations. The way that community members that we come across and that we were working specifically is that these outreach community information sessions are the most important way to get information out. If you're going into the community and you've got your community ambassadors running the information sessions in language, then that's how people are going to get the information they need. That's what people wanted, and they wanted more of that. We also ran focus groups as well to get people's understandings of barriers and facilitators to implementing these adaptive behaviours, and it really came out that there's a strong connection already in community. People in the migrant and refugee communities already have really strong, informal connections, and through communication channels, through like WhatsApp groups. Some of the WhatsApp groups that our community ambassadors are involved in have got more than 500 people on, and they've got messages about heat waves, done in voice messages. They're recorded, and so everyone can hear it, everyone can see it. So I think what came out of this was that community-led, place-based activities that really tap into the existing skills and resources that are already existing in the community is what's going to help build people's confidence and ability to be resilient during heat waves. And also, also acknowledging that people already have adaptive behaviours. People already have this knowledge, whether it's evidence-based or they've got it from some official source or whatever. But people intuitively do things to keep themselves cool. But the things that people are facing barriers are systemic: insecure housing, inadequate housing, poor quality housing, no access to resources. Not being able to turn on their AC because they can't afford the AC. Some people even told us that they weren't able to understand how to work their AC. Older people, particularly from migrant communities, we heard a lot of people talking about the health impacts, particularly when we're talking about chronic illness, and we know that people from migrant and refugee communities also have quite a lot of unmanaged or undiagnosed chronic health issues as well, which we heard from our panelists that is exacerbated during heat. So sorry, I feel like I do this in 6 minutes. I feel like there's probably a lot more I could talk about, and I have a table as well if you wanted to chat. But I think hopefully I gave a good overview of the project.
Thank you. You did a great job. So 10 minutes left. So I'd really love to get some questions out, and I'm going to kind of jump the shark, and I'd like to ask a question. One of the things that's become really apparent to many of us that are working in space, and that I personally am very worried about, is that this all seems to be in the community's hands. It's often run by women and in the community's hands, and we know that we know from all of the data that community is the only space that this is going to make a difference, that community is the only way that we're going to actually be able to reach each other. We know that community is the only way we survive. We know the data that if you are disconnected from community, your risk of dying in a climate event is much, much higher than if you are actually connected to the community. But I wonder how people feel in this panel about how let down we've been by governments and what that means. I know, big question. But I think it's a really important thing to reflect back to, because we're all sitting here talking about community, which is excellent, which is the right approach, and we know it. Our data tells us it's what it is. But I just think that we kind of do need to mourn a bit and grieve a bit that governments have let us down so very badly, and really start to accept as a community that this is the way forward, that whatever they're doing, knock yourselves out, we'll just have to keep moving forward doing our own thing. And I wondered if I could get some feedback from the panel on that. what do they think about it? Genevieve's busting. Go, Genevieve.
I agree, but I also say don't disengage from the democratic process.
Yeah,
Okay. Yes, it makes you angry, it makes you despair, it makes you sad to see that there should be being more done. Community action is absolutely necessary, but we can't let our governments off the hook. And that includes every level of government, okay, from your local council up to the federal government, okay? They all have clear responsibilities, and there are systemic issues that we can't solve at just a community level, and they have to get on with it. So I'm not just talking about elections and being part of the democratic process there, but staying in touch with your local MP, letting them know what your concerns are, and that can be really hard for people when we're caught in a cost of living crisis to try and get to some of the underlying issues that are causing it, but making it all a whole heap worse. And climate change is the obvious issue there, and fossil fuel prices and all these kinds of things, making it really hard for us. Keep speaking to your MP. Keep speaking to your local council too. Okay, they have responsibilities in the heat health space. They have responsibilities in local emergency management. And for heat specifically, local councils should be providing cooler places for people to go, people who don't have a cool home to go to. They should be providing those places. In many cases, often it'll be just a matter of making the already available neighbourhood cooler places, making it obvious where they are, making ones that you have to pay something for, like the local pool or whatever. Making them free for possibly everybody, but certainly people on healthcare cards or something like that. Interact with your local council. Make sure they've got things like, clear lists of places people can go to, especially free places. Need a good variety of them to go to. All of those kind of things. Keep being part of it, okay? Don't let them off the hook, okay? That's the main thing.
So we'll move to the audience and just give anyone a chance to ask a question that might like to ask a question.
It's more a statement. I just want to endorse what you said about don't rely on the government. I get that. And we see evidence of this in the crisis. Let's go back to Lismore, the floods at Lismore. The first few days, the government, the resources weren't there for the people. It's the people themselves, they had to help each other. So this isn't a crisis. This is a crisis, and you are right. Unfortunately, we can't depend on the government, but we should still expect them to come on board, and this is where the appraisal activism comes into it. We need to be diligent, dogged in taking them to task and hold them to account for their failures. Thank you.
Question to Genevieve. I'm probably in a fairly vulnerable group in that I am 73 years old, live with COPD and live in a public housing high-rise. Now, one of the things that we've picked up on in relation to your last answer on government, I've been in that building 18 years now, and when we had the 2009 and 2014 heat waves, there seemed to be a lot more action directed at residents themselves. But what's happened since is that we were part of what was then called in the South community health. That then became a sort of corporatised or branded startup that has now been made part of what is called Better Health Network, which now extends not only the city of Portland and Stonington, but way out to the east as far as I think just about Dandenong. Now, what's happened in that is that some of the actual community organisations, or that were community organisations, have basically, because of the way the organisation transited, we're possibly getting less direct response in that we used to, on a 2014 door knocks, checks on people. That doesn't seem to be happening now, and it's something that possibly we have to look at. Organisations such as Sweltering Cities, Doctors for the Environment, have to start reinforcing back to government or assisting us doing it.
Thank you so much. Genevieve, you guys got a comment? Did you want to talk about that?
I have a comment, because I think it's funny that Carmen said in the morning, because I think the government's made it so easy, because you can't sit under the radar now. You can't say, oh, I don't care about politics, it doesn't affect me. You just have to sit back and go, what are they doing? Who put these people in charge? Like, how are they getting away with this? And that's it. We've reached a point where they're no longer getting away with it. And kind of everyone's kind of, not uprising, but if they don't do anything about it, they will be. They'll sit down and they'll say, like, hey, we're all doing the right stuff. You're meant to be reflecting us. Where's your reflection? Where's your salary? What is that going for? And so, yeah, I think it's a great point that be sad of what's happening, but use that to, instead of use rage, like empowerment, be like, alright, like lift the stakes. We're all going out and doing stuff, like why don't you?
Carmen, thanks everyone for coming and being a part of it. Thanks so much to these amazing panellists doing this incredible work with our communities and just, keeping people safe. It's really amazing. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone. And thanks very much, Vicky. So, what's next?